So recently there was a 60 Minutes piece on the Jacksonville, Florida real estate market. And I don't watch the news often, but this piece was sent to me from multiple different people and I took a listen, or watched it, I guess. And it's focused on the challenge of rising rents in our Jacksonville area and rising home prices, and what's going on and kind of what you should do about that. So I thought I'd take a minute here and kind of sift through what's happening around us, and then we'll talk about what you should do about it. So first off, they spend a fair amount of time talking to the CEO of, I believe it's Tricon Residential, which is a group or a fund that's buying single-family houses around the country, primarily in the Sun Belt, so Southeast, Southwest, and maybe even some all the way out to California, but primarily in the Southeast. And so you can watch the video, I'll link it here, but essentially what he's saying is we've found residential single-family houses to have a good return, and so we're buying them. And the truth of the matter is they are not the only one. We're working with a group personally that bought 230 houses last year just from our office, essentially. And there are, I don't know, a dozen other groups like that. Some of these are large publicly traded companies. I've talked about this before, but the likes of Open Door, although Zillow was buying houses, they're not anymore. There's Knock, there's all these companies that do this. So the 60 Minute piece kind of said, these are the bad guys. They're taking away houses from potential first-time home buyers. And I would say that's not exactly how it's working out. Here's the issue. The first issue, and again, I'll put the link in the article here, but in 2020, right as we were headed into COVID and the pandemic, the Fed, or entity that creates money in the United States, took the total money supply in our economy from about $4 trillion to about $20 trillion at present. So we've 5x'd the number of dollars that are in the system. And so I have this very crude 4-year-old looking drawing on the whiteboard behind me. That's the 4 examples. So let's say we have 5 people that want to buy a car. That was true then, this is true now. And these people, at the time, they had $10,000 of disposable income or available funds to purchase a car with. Everybody wants the same car in our 4 example. And I realize that I'm making a very complex monetary system into something that is far too simplified, but I think you'll get the point. 5 people want to buy the car, they have $10,000 each, and everybody's bidding. $10,001, $10,002, and then all of a sudden, in 2 years' time, we give those same 5 people $50,000, and they didn't really do anything different. Didn't, suddenly come up with this great idea that was a business plan to make more money or get a new job that made more money. All of a sudden, they just had more money in their pockets. And so these same people want the same car. What happens? Now we're not going 10,001, 10,002. We're going 11,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000. And you've seen this happen, right? Used vehicles through the roof. Cost of buying a home through the roof. And that's a large reason why, because a lot of this money found a way into larger banks and financial institutions, hedge funds, and it needs a return. It needs yield. It needs to not just sit in the bank and do nothing. It needs to get money back. So they looked around, we run out of options. Now we're buying single-family homes. And that's not going to stop. So you couple that with people moving to Florida and historically low interest rates, and we see what we've seen in the last few years. And we'll probably see for the next few years because of this inflationary component that I just mentioned here, the fact that we have more dollars in the system. I also read an article recently in the Jacksonville Business Journal. Let's see, it was titled Big Gap Between Jack's Housing Prices, Income Growth versus Inflation. And there was an individual from Clever Real Estate. I think they were the economist or spokesperson for the company. Name was Denitha Doe, and the quote was, I'm not sure about these numbers, but this was a quote in the article. For context, income since 2000, the year 2000, has only increased 7%, What that means for a resident of Jacksonville, Florida, is that income isn't keeping pace with inflation or with home prices. The flip side of that is that they're saying since 2000, home prices have increased 175%. Again, not sure I'm buying that, but let's say it's close. We get the point. Like the average first-time home buyer, the average median household income family cannot buy the same house today that they could have 20 years ago. It's a different level of house. So let's talk about that, because the question is, what do you do about it? So as a buyer, my, I guess we'll call it prediction, is that prices aren't done yet. This whole inflation thing means that you need to be invested in assets. Now, maybe that means you go put money in the stock market and you're invested in publicly traded companies. Or maybe it means you start a small business that you can invest in and hire people and grow with the rise of our dollar or the cost of goods, inflation, right? But maybe it means you buy a house and you can't buy, we know, the same house for the same amount of money that you could have 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 20 years ago. But if prices continue to rise, the way to lock in a hedge against inflation is to buy a house. Maybe it's not ideal, but it's something that you can grow into and grow with. And if a few years down the road it's worth significantly more than it was when you bought it, you can sell and use the equity from the sale of that home to get into the neighborhood or area that you prefer to be in. The other one is sellers. So in the 60 Minutes piece, the host interviews a real estate agent who made sort of an offhand comment about you don't need to do anything to a house to prepare it for sale anymore, because some hedge fund's just going to come in and buy it and do whatever they're going to do. Well, not true. Cash purchases, which would be hedge funds, cash purchases in our market are up a little bit, but not a ton. It's like went from maybe 23% a few years ago to like 27% in our marketplace. And so cash purchases represent about a quarter of transactions. Looking at the numbers, maybe a third or half of those transactions are buying groups. And so they are buying a significant number of houses. Maybe it's 7%, maybe it's 12%. The point is, it's only about 1 in 10. So we would need to do a strategic look at your house to say, is your house a primary target for one of these funds? Because they all have buying criteria, the area, age of home, floor plans, age of roof, et cetera, et cetera. So we keep a pretty close eye on what different groups are buying to know when we work with a seller, hey, you're probably going to be a target for these funds, so you may not want to put new countertops in because that's not going to help you out. So it needs to be a longer conversation if you're thinking about selling the house as to what you do to prepare it for sale, because the thought that you don't need to do anything and you still get the same money is certainly not true about 80 to 90% of the time. So I hope all this is helpful. Feel free to give me a call if you have any questions, 904-405-1995, or you can shoot me an email, jeff@era.com, and let's help you build a financial future that's thinking about the things that are going on in our economy right now.